So I like to use metrics, and I think this is a form of looking at metrics and data with goals in mind. I don't want to collect data for its own sake. I want to use that data, and I want to use it to answer some important question to the shelter. So I think most of us would agree that reducing intake, and especially cat intake, which we're going to focus on here, is a goal of most of our shelters. And in Tompkins County, what we decided is we really would look at kittens. The whole notion being, if our spay-neuter, if we can figure out where our clusters of kitten, if there is clustering, if there are patterns to our kitten intake, if we could identify them and go in and target them, if it was a particular household, if it was a particular neighborhood, we could go, and we being Jim and his people, I'm using we very loosely here, sorry about that, Jim, they could go and really even write a grant and get money to really go in and blanket those areas to much greater extent than other areas. And with that data, if we could demonstrate that, we thought, and I think it was borne out, we'll talk a little bit about that in a few minutes, that by having that data, that would enhance the likelihood of getting grants to further the spay-neuter program such that it could actually do that kind, because it's going to be more expensive to do targeted kinds of spay-neuter. Because now you've got to identify the clusters, you're going to do something more intensive in that area. And you can choose a variety of different techniques, and we'll talk a little bit about what Tompkins County actually did in a minute. So our questions were, is there a spatial distribution of entering kittens? Are there patterns in that spatial distribution that might be helpful to us? And can we identify those areas and really think about strategies that we can implement? So let's talk a little bit about how, and I'm going to do this just from a very conceptual standpoint for two reasons. One, it gets a little bit complicated about how to do it. You really do need a GIS technician of some sort. Secondly, Jan doesn't know how to do it, so so that's even a more important reason. But it starts with having good information about location. And because of that, we looked at the data we had for stray cats and said, ooh, we don't have good information from where our strays came from. So the study that we actually did targeted owner-surrendered kittens only. Okay? That's not necessarily ideal, but at this point, with the data that we had, because you want a fairly high proportion of good data, complete and accurate data, in order to be able to do this. And we actually looked at two periods of time. We started out looking at 2007, 8, 9. No, it was 6, 7, 8. And then said, but that's older data now. We were kind of working out the bugs of doing it. Could we do it? Did we have good enough data? And then went to the more recent data. You want to get as recent data as possible, obviously. And then we looked at all the addresses. They were heavily edited. This takes some time. This is the tedious part about it, okay? Data were what we call geocoded. There's a special feature within the software that enables you to do this. And then this geocoding puts coordinates on each of your addresses so that they can be overlaid on a map and put accurately onto the map. And in our case, we had 93% of the original owner-surrendered records that had good enough data to be used. So that's pretty high. You're striving to get as high a proportion as possible, because otherwise you're quite likely to get misleading information. Okay? So here's the distribution of the kittens in Tompkins County. Looking at that, now obviously some of these little triangles represent more than one kitten. Okay, so looking at that, does it look like there are any patterns? Looks like there's maybe more here, but that's Ithaca. That's where the people live. We're probably about right here somewhere, down in here. But so we need something else. Because this is way too many spots. You wouldn't want to try to say, well, I'm going to target all of those. You want to try to begin, and so what we had to do is really think about, think about how could we refine the question. And I think what we were really, really after, as we began to talk about it more, was the repeat offenders. The people that, not the person that, oops, my cat got out, I had one litter, I got her in, I got her spayed. We were after locations that year after year contribute kittens.